Hello friends, and thank you so much for choosing to join me for this video today. I read a quote recently from Saint Teresa of Calcutta, otherwise known as Mother Teresa, and I'm going to share it with you. Spread love everywhere you go. Let no one ever come to you without leaving happier. This is a real life goal for me, and I hope that when you finish watching this video today, you do feel a little happier. Well, it's been a very busy and productive time here over the past couple of weeks, preparing for Christmas and having very little spare time at all. Up until today, it had been 2 weeks since I'd been able to even step into my studio, which seems crazy now, but I did spend part of the time away in Sydney at my son's graduation. And then for Christmas, my son and his fiancée joined us here on the homestead for a couple of days. Now that Christmas has passed and my son has gone back to Sydney, things are starting to settle into our regular, simple routine again. These are really the days that I look forward to the most, where there are no outside obligations or appointments, but just a lovely flowing rhythm of the jobs that need to be done for the day, the little tasks that keep the homestead constantly ticking. I'll also be spending some time in the studio, which I'm really excited about. I have several things that I want to work on, and I'll be sharing those with you today. I'm trying stuff out. That is what I'm doing here. So you can see me sort of hesitating at different moments and not being quite sure about which shed I'm in or where my shuttle should be. I'm just trying stuff out. It's a really good and fun thing to do. I had a little bit of warp left on the end of this warp and I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. And it wasn't really long enough to do, anything that was going to be an actual project. So I thought I'll just try something out. I had an idea and now I'm trying it out. And that is how a lot of my designs, classes, all the stuff I do, all my YouTube tutorials, how they come about. I just try stuff and sometimes it works great. Sometimes it fails miserably, but it's all good fun, and I encourage you to do the same. Try things out. I do have a little bit of a challenge here because I'm so close to the end of the warp. When you want to do pick up when you're near the end of a warp, it can be harder because your threads are not sitting as flat as they were, because you've got the apron rod here and the threads are going around the apron rod, and instead of being all the way at the back beam and sort of sandwiched against that back beam and it's super flat, now they're doing their own thing a little bit. And you can get around that with a bit of patience, but the first few times that you do it, it's a little bit challenging because you're not used to threads sort of being in the wrong places at the wrong time. But once you know where they're supposed to be, it's okay, you can figure it out. So what I'm doing here is a little bit of pickup And so I thought I could just chat to you while I'm doing it. Probably not the greatest idea to try and chat to somebody while you're figuring something out, but I do have a little bit of experience with this, so hopefully things will turn out okay. My thoughts for this particular piece would be probably to do just a mini class for the online weaving school for members. Something that I've been thinking about a lot in recent times is ways that I can give more value to my members, because the online weaving school, the bread and butter, what keeps it going and what gives me a regular income are the members. And yes, I have people who purchase single classes. That happens all the time, lots and lots of those. But once someone has purchased a class, then that transaction is done. And you don't really know how many people are going to purchase classes or when they're going to purchase them. Memberships give me a bit of predictability. I can say, okay, I can look at the number of memberships that I've got. I know that if I've got a certain number for the year that stays around that level, then I'm fine. Everything's good. If it drops below that level or starts to drop below that level, then I need to do something to maybe try and bring some more members in, whatever it is. But for some time now, that number has been stable and around a really good level, and I'm really happy with that. But there's a tendency in business to always be going out looking for more customers, trying to bring in more revenue. And that's kind of, just part of having a business, especially when you're in the startup mode. But you need to also really take care of the people who have already invested in you, because that's what people are doing when they purchase a membership, when they purchase a class, when they buy one of my designs. They're investing in me and my business and my future. And it's really important that I then show my appreciation to those people and provide them with excellent service. You probably know a bunch of businesses yourself that you no longer patronize because the customer service was so bad, or whoever sold you something didn't really seem to care either way whether you bought something, or they cared up until the point that you made the transaction and then they were bye-bye. And who wants to be like that? That's a horrible way to run business. So I want to find more ways to really provide value for my members. And I think I'm doing that because I do make classes regularly. I have the membership group and I've got my finger on the pulse of my community. But I'm so grateful to all of my members that I want to give them more. And so I've been thinking of just some smaller classes that I could do, because often the classes that I do are quite lengthy, and then that tends to be quite a commitment for me. And it also means that I get less content put onto the weaving school because of that commitment. So I used to do more shorter tutorials over there, and I may start to do that again. But anyway, if this one turns out well, I will put that up over there. I'm going to give you a closer look at this in a moment, just so that you can see what I'm doing instead of just seeing my face talking the whole time. But the actual tutorial will probably not be here. It will be on the weaving school. Now I've just found a problem, so I need to problem solve and go back. So brilliant with weaving that you can just unweave mistakes. Absolutely love that about weaving. Okay, fixed. So yes, if you are a member of the Online Weaving School already, you can look forward to more, maybe shorter bursts of content this year. Maybe similar to what people might do on something like Patreon. You know, they do extra. You can watch them on YouTube, but if you sign up to them on Patreon, there will be extra. And I guess that's kind of what I'm wanting to do on the weaving school. People have mentioned to me a lot of times that I could be doing Patreon. And I'm only mentioning this because I was just talking about Patreon as an example. I decided 5 years ago when I started the weaving school on Teachable that that was going to be my only platform as far as my classes go. So yes, you can see a heap of my tutorials and some class type videos on YouTube, but I wanted to have all of my video content in one place to avoid confusion. And also for me, the weaving school format is working so well that I really wouldn't want to change that at the moment. And I wouldn't want the extra work either, because I know Patreon is extra work. So what I'm doing here, just to tell you a little bit about it, is I'm doing just a bit of pickup, but I'm also combining that with an inlay technique. If you haven't heard of inlay before, do I have any inlay videos on YouTube? I've got an inlay class and I can link to that down below. Not sure if I've got any videos here. Sorry, I can't remember. I don't think I have. But if you're not familiar with it at all, it's basically usually bringing in a supplementary yarn weft that is contrasting with your background weft. And you'll see that here in a moment. You can probably see already, these are my two wefts and they're quite different. So, and the inlay, you place it where you want it, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to continue building this, and I might actually, yeah, I think I'm going to change this in a minute too. Change the shape that I'm actually weaving. I have a tendency to get a little bit bored with repetitive weaving if it's really repetitive, or I start out with one design and think that that's the design that I'm going to do, and then I'm weaving along and I'm like, I think I'll change this. That's just my tendency to do that. But that can be a good thing too, because that allows me to make even more discoveries sometimes. All right, I'm going to do here, I'm going to drop one thread from every side. Yeah. Oh yeah, okay, so I need to go down to do that. And drop you. Stay there. Okay, I think I got something now. So I'm just playing around with the placement of that supplementary weft yarn. Another thing I wanted to chat about that's completely unrelated to what I'm doing here is vacuum cleaners. So I've been looking at the wet dry vacuum cleaners for some time, and these are not the industrial ones. I know that they're those great big industrial ones that you can get. These are like a stick vacuum cleaner for a hard floor, like a wooden, tile, linoleum kind of floors, because we have a lot of hard floors now and I'm constantly battling to keep them clean, and it's a little bit of a stress, and I'd rather have some sort of good solution for it. So I was thinking about getting one of those vacuum cleaners. I'm looking at one in particular. It's a Bissell, but I'm not sure, I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put it up on the screen, I'll put a photo or whatever. And that's the one I'm thinking of. And my grandmother, who's 95 and in a nursing home, God bless her, she very generously gave us some money for Christmas. And I was thinking that if I bought one of those vacuum cleaners, the wet dry cleaner, I would still have enough money left over for the project that I mentioned in the last video, which was, now I'm forgetting what I'm doing here, which was the deck down at the dam. So I was going to stain the deck and then put a park bench there and maybe some nice lights for evening time, some nice solar lights. So if I bought the vacuum cleaner, I would still have enough of that money left over to complete that project, which is a bit exciting. But I don't like buying things that then end up not being what I expected them to be, or that don't do what I thought they were going to do, and then I feel like I've just wasted money, or I, have this useless appliance. So I would like your thoughts if you have any experience with these wet dry vacuum cleaners, only the stick type. And this one's a cordless one, so you have it on the charger and then you use it. It runs for 25 minutes and then you can recharge it, which would work fine for me. But if you yourself have any experience with them, I would love to hear about that, whether they're actually as good as they seem or whether there are pitfalls with them. I think one of the pitfalls is they want you to buy their particular solution, a cleaning solution that you put in the canister. Sometimes I feel like that's a bit of a gimmick. Like I'm thinking, can you get away with using your own cleaning solution or using just water sometimes or stuff like that? Because I don't use many cleaners in our home. I actually make our own spray cleaner, and I don't like to be using a lot of chemicals, and I don't want to be having to buy chemicals online. So I'd like your thoughts on that as well. That would be great. All right, I'm getting something more here of what I was after, and it's looking good. So I'm not sure how many repeats of this I should do. I think that's probably enough, and then I will adjust the pattern again because I want to have like a tapering shape. I'll carry on and I will come and give you a closer look once I have a bit more of the shape done. You can see what I've been doing. Okay, there we go. There is my inlay shape. Not quite a triangle, but sort of getting there, more of a mound, I guess. I'm pretty happy with it, except for this top part right here, which needs a little bit of something, and I'm not sure what, which means I need to practice a little bit more and figure out how I'm going to make that look neater than it does currently. The problem is that some of the tie downs didn't quite happen and I had to go around the edges manually, which was okay, but looks a little bit messier than a lot of these other pieces do. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. So I'm going to do another experimental shape on this same warp, I hope. I've got just a little bit up here left that I can eke out of this warp, and then I'll be able to make that short class for my members at the online weaving school. Yesterday I got to do something I've wanted to do for absolutely ages, and that is do a little bit of fabric shopping. We went to a larger town a little bit further away from our home, and they have a Spotlight store there. If you don't know what a Spotlight store is, then you're not Australian, that's for sure. It's kind of like a big haberdashery, sewing supplies, craft supplies, bedding, Manchester, all that kind of thing. Maybe the US equivalent might be Joann's. I'm not sure though. I'm not that knowledgeable about such things. But I was really pleased because last time I went there, which is quite a while ago now, probably 6 months at least, I was looking for some fabric for skirts for my girls, and I could only find one that was like semi-affordable. I bought that and I made my daughter a skirt, so that worked out well. But this time when I went there yesterday, they were having a sale on so much fabric. There was a ton of clearance fabric. So I managed to get 3 different types of fabric, and I got each of these for about a quarter of their original price. Now, for those of you who know me, you'll know that I'm pretty frugal, and for probably the entirety of my adult life, I've lived frugally. I don't take it to an extreme degree, but if I can avoid paying full price for something, then I will. And if I can avoid wasting things, you know, I just like to be sensible. So the thing is, if I see a fabric that is really beautiful and I really want it for a particular project and it's quite expensive, then I'll consider buying it if it's good quality fabric. So the thing about Spotlight is, and I don't want to be down on Spotlight or anything because I'm a long-term customer of theirs, but I know that their fabric is not great quality. It's mostly made in China. Some of it's made in Japan, but mostly not. And so I know it's not going to be anywhere near the quality of, say, some of the European fabrics that I've bought in the past and paid top dollar for. So I'm very happy to go in there and buy fabric as long as it's discounted. Then I feel that I'm getting worth, you know, what I paid for. So anyway, I'll show you what I got. I intend to make 3 skirts. We're skirt wearing folk in my family, the females are, and one of my daughters wears pants for work because it's more practical. But in general, even around the homestead, us girls wear skirts. It's what we do. And so I got this really pretty, this is like a cotton poplin. So this is a woven fabric, not stretchy. And it's just got this really pretty rose design on it. So I'm thinking of this one for my youngest daughter. And then the other 2 are stretch fabrics. This one actually says on the label bamboo. I don't know what, you know, how much bamboo is in it, because the thing with clearance fabrics is you often don't get the extra information with it. But I thought this was quite a nice design too. Just a nice floral design. I'm holding it upside down, but never mind. And the last one is also a stretch fabric. And this is just an overall, wrong side, overall nice design. So what I do with our skirts, because I make them fairly frequently and the girls are kind of hard on them because of their lifestyles here, especially the youngest one. She's got her puppy, she's got her chickens that she cares for and things like that. Another daughter has horses, but obviously she doesn't wear a skirt to ride. She wears riding pants. That's another reason that I don't want to pay top dollar for fabrics, is I know that these are going to be round home skirts. They're not going to last an incredibly long time. And for that reason also, I don't put a lot of work into them. I do a very simple A-line design. And then with the stretch fabrics, I usually use the same fabric as a waistband and just do a really simple waistband at the top, and that way you don't need to use elastic. Elastic is actually pretty expensive here. So I use a piece of the fabric and I formulate a waistband, and then I stretch sew it in. I'll be showing you a little bit of the process as I go along making these skirts, but pretty much I make it as easy as possible on myself, so that it's not a huge time investment, but I think that they turn out to be very attractive skirts. Now for the woven fabric, I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do for a waistband. Often in the past I've done elastic waistbands, but apart from being expensive, I don't necessarily really like the way they look. Often the fabric will twist or turn over or otherwise sort of curl on the inside of the waistband, and that's annoying. And so I have actually made woven skirts with a stretch waistband as well. So I would use a plain piece of stretch fabric, like maybe a black piece at the top of this as a stretchy waistband. And that part of the waistband doesn't tend to show because my girls don't usually tuck their shirts into their skirts, so it doesn't really matter about the top whether it shows or not. So hopefully today I can start at least cutting these skirts out. Well, I thought I'd ordered enough fabric, but guess what? I didn't. The problem is because you need the grain of the fabric with the greatest amount of stretch going across the body, there's just not quite enough length to make it work. So this is the basic pattern. By the way, this is a CraftyMamas pattern. It's called the Hoodie Skirt, and I'll link to it down below. It's a very simple, basic pattern. I've used this an incredible amount over the years. So I've got my doubled fabric here and I've got my fold on this side, so I can lay that on the fold. But then when I flip it over to get the other folded side, you can see I don't have enough fabric there. And then the fabric that I have left over, if I fold that across, it's nowhere near the width that I need. So my solution is I'm going to cut the front piece here with the fold, so when it opens out it's going to be a smooth panel. Then I'm going to split the back into two pieces. So if you had enough fabric, this would be simple. You just do another piece on the fold. I'm going to place one piece across this way, and then I'm going to place the other piece this way, and that way I'll have two pieces that are the same, and they're just going to have to be joined at the back. So I also need to allow a little bit extra for that additional seam at the back. I have actually done this once before with a skirt and it worked out fine. However, that skirt was a solid color, not a pattern. So I'm not sure how the pattern is going to match up at the back. That may be one of the downsides, but we'll see how that's going to turn out. I think it's the only option I have at the moment. Oh, by the way, something I could have done is shortened the skirt, made a knee-length skirt, and then it would have fit both panels on this piece. But my girls like to have their skirts a little bit longer, at least below the knee. So even if I make it halfway between the calf length and the knee length, I still don't have enough fabric here. I tested that idea already. So I think this is what I'm going to have to go with, and I'll just hope for the best, see how it turns out. I've got the first skirt cut out and sewed up, apart from the waistband. I was actually going to cut out 3 skirts today. I started getting a sore back after cutting this one out, and so I've found the best thing to do is vary my activities when I'm getting sore, so that I'm not doing the same thing over and over and just exacerbating the problem. So anyway, I've got one skirt that is not too far off being finished. This is the front, and I'll show you the back so that you can see where, how I had to join the 2 panels together. And I'm really pleased to say that because of the busyness of this pattern, this is the seam right here, you can't even really notice it unless you're looking for it, which is brilliant. So now I'm up to sewing on the waistband. I got my daughter in here, and the first waistband that I had measured out, I tested it on her and it was too small. So I've cut another one out and made a larger one. And what I do to put the waistbands in is I fold it first in half. And by the way, this was an 8-inch width, but I've folded it over so that it's meeting itself and the seam is at the back. So this is it folded in half, and then I fold it into quarters according to the seam in the waistband. And then I just mark the quarter areas. And then I mark the half areas. So just all of the folds I mark. Okay, so those parts are marked, and then I basically do the same on the skirt itself. So I've got the 2 side seams, they're my side marks, and then I just fold the top in half. And that gives me the quarter measures as well. Actually, because I've got that waistband at the back of this one, that could be included as a mark, but I'm going to mark it with a pin anyway, just as an extra visual. And then if I want to, I mark the seams at the sides with pins as well. And then the next job is to line up the pins marked in the waistband with the pins marked here. Now the actual waistline of the skirt is going to be, you can see already that it's larger than the actual waistband, and that's part of the intention, is that this waistband is going to be stretched, and I'm going to sew as I'm stretching that out so that it comes back in and just creates that slightly smaller waistline, because we all have because most of us have smaller waists than hips. So how I'm going to do that is I turn this over and I'm going to pop the skirt inside of the waistband so that right sides are facing. And from there I start matching up the pins and pinning it all out. So this is kind of a planning phase. Okay, so that's my first mark, and I usually leave my marks in place in case I want to adjust them afterwards, and just pin everything in place as I go. So then I can pin my side seams with my side marks on the waistband. And the other side can also be pinned. I just do my best to match them up. I'm certainly not a perfectionist. In a moment I'm going to share just a few sewing with knit fabric tips with you, and you will see and discover that I'm definitely not a perfectionist when it comes to this. Okay, so that's all pinned roughly at those points. You can go further if you want to and put more pins along. You can see those gaps now, but I prefer to just put those 4 points in and then stretch it out and work it out at the actual machine. Okay, a few tips about sewing with knit fabric. I know a lot of people find knit fabric a bit intimidating and they sort of avoid even using it, but I've always found it to be really forgiving and quite friendly to sew with once you're used to it. Like most things, there are a few quirks that you need to get used to. First of all, when you buy your knit fabric, make sure that you wash it and dry it completely. It does have, like most fabrics, a sizing in it, so a chemical that they put into it to make it present well in the shop. It's a little bit stiffer and you want to wash that out. And also it's really important to wash it because you don't want to make a garment and then wash it and have the fabric really shrink and then find out that way that you needed to wash it first. So just always wash it first as a general rule. The second absolutely essential thing that I think is you need to use a ballpoint or a jersey needle. And these will come in the size of your machine. You just need to find it under either ballpoint or jersey. The names are interchangeable. This is a different type of needle to your regular needle. If you try and sew knit fabric with a regular needle, I just don't do it. I never do it because those needles are designed for woven fabric. It's kind of like the ballpoint needle goes through the fabric like butter and you won't have to struggle with that. Now, I'm no expert at sewing. I have been sewing for a long time. I started sewing when my kids were really little because, especially when I had some girls come along, I wanted to make them some very unique and pretty clothes without having the expensive price tag, because I had worked as a private nanny for years before I had any children of my own. And the children had beautiful wardrobes, but I saw the price tags of what those seasonal wardrobes actually cost the parents. And I knew that wasn't going to be possible for me, but I still wanted my kids to have really nice clothes. And so I started making them. And I certainly did make them a lot of unique clothes and really beautiful stuff as well. So I have been sewing for a long time, but I sort of do things I guess, my own way a little bit. So if you are a professional dressmaker or seamstress, you might want to avert your ears while I'm giving these tips. So another little quirk of using knit fabric. Knit fabric, by the way, is also sometimes referred to as jersey, and they are different compositions. Sometimes they're fully cotton, sometimes they're fully polyester, sometimes they're a blend of the two, sometimes they're bamboo. All different compositions. It's just that the fabric is knitted on a machine rather than woven on a machine, and that means it's a stretchy fabric. So when you're cutting it or when you're sewing with it, and I think this is the thing that people find most intimidating, is the fabric has a lot of movement potentially, and this can depend on how much stretch it has, because it might have a really huge percentage of stretch, or it might just have a small amount of stretch. So the stretchier it is, the more difficult it is to sew with it, the more movement it's going to have. So a couple of things. When you're cutting it out, and this is one of those things that a dressmaker I'm sure would not recommend, but I don't worry too much when I'm cutting it out if the edges are a bit jagged, because what I do is I sew my seams and then I tidy everything up on the serger. This is my next tip for sewing with knit fabric, is to have a serger. Now, I don't recommend that you go out and buy a serger for 1 or 2 projects. They can be very expensive, but if you're going to be using knit fabric all the time, then I recommend you get a serger, and that's the reason that I first got one, because I was doing some sewing lessons with a lady. She said, what are your goals, aims with sewing? And I said, I want to make my kids clothes. And she said, you're going to need a serger then. And she was right. And I'm really super glad that I got one, because now all this time down the track, I'm using my serger all the time for my hand woven fabric, and I'm still using it for the knit fabric as well. And so I've had that same serger for around 15 years now, and I bought it secondhand. It was an ex-demo model at the shop, and so I got a pretty good deal on it. So for me, that was a fantastic investment that has been very worthwhile. Some people will just use their serger for doing the seaming and everything with the knit fabric rather than doing the sewing machine, but I do both. I have tried doing just the serger. It hasn't worked so well for me. I've found that the seams were not as strong as I wanted, and so I both sew and serge my seam lines, and that gives me very neat finishes. So if I take the skirt as an example, here's one of my seams. It just tidies everything up. The knit fabric doesn't really fray, but it can tear a bit at the seams with a bit of wear. And also at the waistband, I like the finish that it gives on the waistband. Just neatens everything up on the inside. Okay, I've got 2 more basic tips. One is, if you watch the video of me sewing the skirt, even though I had it sped up, it might be a little bit difficult to see, but anytime that I wanted to move or pivot the fabric on the machine, say that I was going around the waistband, before I move the fabric, I would put the needle down, and you can either do that with your pedal if that's easy enough, or if you find it frustrating trying to position the needle with your pedal, it can be a bit tricky because it might shoot up again, then you can just manually put it down by rotating the handle at the side. So it goes down into the fabric, and then what it does is it holds the fabric in place for you, because even if you have the presser foot down, if you have the needle up and then you go to move the fabric, then you're moving away a little bit from the place where you were, and because it's knit fabric, it moves even more. So if you have that needle down, it's going to hold the fabric for you while you need to move or rotate or pivot or whatever you're doing with the fabric. That is a really good tip, and you'll see exactly what I mean if you give it a try yourself. And also, while you're at the machine, try to have the garment, so if I'm sewing on the top part of the garment, if I have the rest of this fabric hanging, say it's hanging over the side of the table, that's going to weigh and pull on the part that I'm trying to work on. it's going to be frustrating because it's going to move your fabric away from where you want to. So what I try to do is bunch the fabric up and just have it tucked up right next to the machine so that there's no extra weight on the part that I'm working on, and I'm not going to get that frustrating movement. And the last tip is to iron everything. If you sew a seam, iron it. If you do some top stitching, iron it. All the way through the piece, anytime you're sewing something together, whatever you're doing, take it to the ironing board, have your ironing board set up with the iron on for the entirety of the project, unless of course you're going away from the project, don't leave your iron on, but I just mean while you're there actually making the project. And then also when you're finished, give the whole thing a really good press. It makes an incredible difference. It makes seams sit flat. It makes a lumpy, bumpy garment look flat and professional and beautiful. So I hope those few tips are helpful to you. And now I think it's time that I located my daughter and ask her to try the skirt on so we can have a look at how the finished product looks. I want to say a really quick thank you. One of you recommended this book, Company of One by Paul Jarvis, to me. Back when I did the video on Burnout, there were lots and lots and lots of comments, and so I didn't go back and check who had recommended this book to me. I'm sorry about that, but I'm grateful for recommending it. I did buy it and I've just finished reading it and I thought it was really great. It's called Company of One, and it's all about the idea of, in business, not feeling the pressure or feeling like you have to grow to a huge company with lots of employees and making tons and tons of money. It's the idea of keeping things small and manageable. So the title kind of explains it, Company of One. It's just you running the business. You bring in extra people where you need to, but basically you keep it small enough that you can continue to manage it yourself. And I think the main idea that he's trying to get across in this book is that allows you to maintain integrity and to do what you hopefully set out to do in the business in the first place, and that is to have real relationships with your customers, your students, whoever the people who are supporting you with money are. And so I felt like this book really did resonate with me. It's exactly what I want to do, but what I found really great is just the encouragement, because in the business world there's just so much advice, there's pressure. There's people always saying multi-million-dollar business. You've got to go more, you've got to work harder, you've got to earn more, you have to have a team, all these things that just don't resonate with me at all. And so it's really refreshing to hear someone say that you can make the amount of money that you want to make and be happy with that, and not have this burning desire always to make more and to enlarge everything that you have. And that definitely speaks to me. So again, thank you for recommending this book, and if you're interested, I would recommend it to you as well if you're looking at starting a business, if you already have a business and you are feeling that kind of pressure. I'm sure you will find this book encouraging as well. I'll leave a link for it down below.